Good morning and hello, everyone. Good morning to everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of The Legal Zone. Good morning, Dr. Cheney.
Morning.
Good morning, John Salati.
Good morning, Salon. Good to be here.
Good to see you today. We have a very, very special guest with us today. He is not a client as usual, as we usually have. We're going to switch up a little bit and start having other experts in different areas of law to talk about injustices. And this morning we have with us none other than the great Aristotle Theresa. Good morning, Aristotle.
Good morning. Thank you for that introduction.
All right. Aristotle also goes by Ari, right? Ari?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. He is a civil rights attorney and he focuses on zoning and administrative law. Many people may not be familiar with this, but you're going to be at the end of this show. He is a principal of Stoop Law, which is located in the Anacostia neighborhood of Southeast Washington, D.C., for all you Washingtonians. His firm, Stoop Law, has pioneered gentrification law. We're going to define that in a minute, leading to the adjustment of best practices in the D.C. Office of Planning and for land developers. In addition to his urban development and planning law practice, Mr. Theresa is an adjunct professor, having taught classes in land use and urban planning and critical race theory. Mr. Theresa is a fourth generation DC resident, and he is a double HBCU graduate, graduating from Howard University School of Law in 2010 and Clark Atlanta University in 2003. So we are in for a treat today for all of our law students and other people who enjoy learning about the law. Let's just briefly go over these two definitions that we're going to be talking about today. Gentrification. Some of you have heard about it. Some of you may not have heard about it, but what is it? What is gentrification? The process whereby the character of a poor urban area, we're going to get into this today, please listen, is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing, and attracting new businesses, sometimes displacing current inhabitants in the process. So we have this, what some people might call a necessary evil. You are, on one hand, building up cities. You're making it attractive. You're bringing in business. You're bringing in wealth. But on the other hand, you're displacing people. We're going to talk about that. The other is PUD, which is planned unit development. And that the overall goal of a PUD, planned is the key word here, is a process to permit flexibility in the zoning regulations. Every city has zoning regulations, but a planned unit development allows for those to be flexible, so long as the PUD offers one, a commendable number or quality of public benefits. It has to benefit the public. Two, protect and advance the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience of the people. And these, we'll soon see, they could be manipulated or interpreted to mean different things. All righty, so we have that, gentrification and PUD. Brother Theresa, Mr. Ari, tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we would like to know any sort of injustices you have encountered dealing with gentrification and zoning and planned unit development.
Sure. Like was stated, I'm a gentrification attorney. And so what does that mean? You just gave a definition of gentrification. It's a process whereby wealthier people come in, investments are made into neighborhoods, new housing is made. Sometimes people are displaced, and it's a process whereby communities become wealthier. a lot of times existing residents are left out of that process. But in terms of what a gentrification attorney is, I operate under the assumption that in order to effectuate gentrification, there are systems in place that facilitate something like gentrification. And so one of those systems would be the process by which a PUD gets approved, right? So in order to build housing for wealthier people, you need those approvals. You need approvals for more density on a project, or you may need approval from an inspector to come look at the footings or the foundation of a building in order to get this building done. But
are there any guidelines that address the people who are being moved out?
Yes, so the PUD process is supposed to, like when it comes to gentrification, but I just want to state that there's all these systems that surround gentrification that do not work correctly. So in order for gentrification to take place, there's a lot of systems. There's approvals that are made that should not be given. A lot of process is kind of disregarded because gentrification is hyper investment. It's not normal investment. It's investment that's sped up, that's facilitated with government subsidies, with government land, with tax breaks, and also regulatory laxity, like becoming lax with the regulatory process. And so when I say I'm a gentrification attorney, I'm looking at the fallout of gentrification and all the systems that surround gentrification, and how a lot of times guaranteed rights and guaranteed processes that are guaranteed to residents are kind of pushed to the side. And so I'll give an example of that. You asked me what was a great injustice that I've seen in my practice. And I always give this story. It's about Berry Farm. It's my first case. The first case that I did as a zoning attorney, I did just as a resident. I live in Anacostia, so my home practice is here. I also live here. I heard about Berry Farm becoming torn down.
What exactly is Berry Farms for those who don't know?
Okay, Berry Farm is a public housing complex with a long and storied history. It might be outside the scope of the program today, but it's a very long and storied history. From
in Washington D.C.
Washington D.C. It used to be freedmen, slaves, freedmen, and formerly enslaved, built a freedmen colony there. Then it was raised and became public housing, but that's been in Black hands since the end of slavery, and it was something that was promised to us as part of like this freedmen's colony. But anyway.
So wait. So I want a little bit more information on Berry Farms, because I've heard about Berry Farms.
All right.
And everything I've heard about Berry Farms hasn't been too good.
Okay, so I'll give you some information on it. So after the Civil War, African Americans came to D.C. by the droves because Lincoln freed the slaves, and so the natural thing would be, okay, well, there's one person in government who seems that they care about us, so let's go to DC. So a lot of people came to DC after the Civil War, and a lot of them, the formerly enslaved, camped out at the Civil War forts, which were now empty because the war was over, and so they camped out. They were like the first homeless encampments. And we have problem with those. Like, we're always clearing those out. We're doing that today at Union Market and all these other areas in the city. But they cleared it out. And so Lincoln was like, we can't have these people camping out in these neighborhoods all over the city. Let's not give them some land, but let's take Berry Plantation. It was formerly a plantation, and parcel it out and sell it to the formerly enslaved. Give them loans so they can have this land. And so they gave them loans. And the Berry Plantation, they gave them loans for lots of land, and they worked during the day, and at night they came back across the river and they built their homes, right?
Wow.
So for a long time, they lived there. They got horrible terms on their loans too. So like a lot of that stuff was like exploitative, like, they got bad terms on the, because they borrowed it and they built their own houses. But anyway, the proceeds from selling these lots to the slaves went to developing Howard University. It was General Howard who actually was in charge of this Freedmen's program, and he formed a lot of the Black schools. So Clark Atlanta was one of the schools that was formed, as part of like these Freedmen's schools. Howard University was formed from the profits of these lots at Berry Farm. Well, in the 50s, when they were doing urban renewal, they tore down like all the Black neighborhoods. So like a lot of the Black people lived in alleys. There's a Fort Reno and Berry Farm and Southwest. I know you've heard about Southwest. All these were like, if not like perfect communities, they were tight-knit communities. They had businesses there. People owned their properties. And they came and raised Berry Farm because it wasn't up to code, right? Because the formerly enslaved built it at night, on their own without like any like zoning or DCRA or nothing like that. So
Right.
they tore down Berry Farm and made it public housing. And so a lot of the people who were in Southwest and a lot of the people whose neighborhoods were torn down through urban renewal ended up in public housing in Berry Farm. It had about 450 units in its prime, but they tore it down. And so the injustice, getting back to the injustice, I went, they were tearing it down, and I went to the hearing, and some of the residents were defending themselves and opposing the development. They wanted them to develop in place so they could, during the development, they could stay on the site so they wouldn't be displaced from the neighborhood. And they wanted them to do that. And,
is your client these residents? Is that who you usually represent?
Yeah, they were not my clients then, but they ended up being my clients, Berry Farm Tenants and Allies Association. And so they were residents of Berry Farm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they opposed, the development, and they asked to participate in the hearing by applying for something called party status. And in order to have party status, you have to be uniquely impacted by the project. And so the Black chairman of the zoning commission, who's been chairman for 20 years, Anthony Hood, said that they didn't qualify for party status because they were not uniquely impacted, because a lot of people in the city were concerned about Berry Farm being torn down. So their concern wasn't unique.
Even though they were residents of Berry Farm?
Right. So that's the injustice. That because how you're looking, how your face is looking is how I was looking at the hearing when I saw that.
Wow.
And so and that's when I got involved. And so that, I'd say that's like one of the biggest injustices like I've seen like in government, where like some people are like actually participating in like their democracy to like protect their rights, and they're being told that like, no, actually like you don't have the right to do this because you're not uniquely impacted, even though your homes are being destroyed.
Okay, so just to put this in perspective, these people are living in this apartment complex, so to speak, right? Because we have people that watch from outside of this country. So there's this apartment complex in Washington, D.C. that's historically Black. This is, you said that Lincoln almost gave this. He didn't give, but they came together and they started living right after the Civil War. So they've been here for a long time. Yeah. Now they're living in this apartment building, and the government comes and they intend to tear the building down.
Right.
And these residents in the building, they say, no, wait a minute, we live here. And the government's response was, you don't have standing to stop us because you're not going to be uniquely impacted by this. Is that right?
Right. Because some other people also, what he said was people are concerned all over the city about Berry Farm. So, like everyone's concerned about it. So you're not uniquely impacted. Like it impacts everybody.
So, so it seems as though they want to do something, which is build up Berry Farms.
Right.
And they're not going to let anyone, not even the interpretation of the law,
yeah,
stop them.
Exactly. And so when I say I'm a gentrification attorney, that's what I mean. Like, I don't stop gentrification, but I know that in order for gentrification to happen, a lot of shortcuts are made.
So what are some of the rights that people have? If I'm living in this building, if I'm an elderly person and I've been living in a building for 60, 70 years, and they want to come and they want to take it. Yeah, they want to make the city a bigger city. What's going to happen to me? Where am I going to go?
Where are you going to go? Well, I mean, historically, people end up going to the exurbs, like pretty far out, like Woodbridge.
But are they giving me money to go to these places?
If you're part of public housing, yeah, they would give you a voucher, and allow you to move where you want to move or where you're able to find housing that fits your needs, with a voucher. Do they give you money to move? No, they don't give you like moving money or anything like that.
They don't. What if I own the place? Do they give me money to buy something new?
Oh, so if you own a place and they try and displace you?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's rare for them to displace you. I mean, it happens where you can own something and they'll displace you. But when they do that, they're supposed to give you fair compensation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what's going on with that case now? When they said they didn't have the right or the standing, what happened?
Well, they came back and we lost that case, of course, at the agency, but then we appealed it at the zoning commission. Not at the zoning commission, but at the Court of Appeals, and we won the case. But they ended up tearing it down anyway. It's just kind of, they just kind of do what they want to do. We won the case though. But yeah.
And where did those people go?
They're all over the city. Different public housing mostly.
The historical aspect of Berry Farm, is that going to be gone now?
Well, they have historic. They did some historic preservation over there, so they're going to preserve a couple of the Berry Farm units, and maybe do like a museum over there. And that's kind of interesting because they're kind of attaching it to like equity. So they're going to have like residents like work the location and like maybe have some like retail over there. They're going to do something like new, like try and figure out a way so like residents can profit from that culture.
Wow. Okay. What other injustices have you encountered?
I mean, all kinds. I mean, I'd say that's one big one. And most of them are just kind of along those lines. Yeah, I mean, most of them are kind of along those lines, where just something guaranteed didn't happen. Another time was, I worked on a voting case in Ward 8, where they, Ward 8 is kind of a gentrifying neighborhood. I don't know who's familiar with Ward 8, but I mean, most of Ward 8 is Black.
Yeah, well, what is Ward 8? So people may not be from DC. Ward is a section of the city or what?
Yeah, Ward 8 is a section of the city. It's 95% Black. And it's a lot of unemployment. I mean, almost a lot of morbidity, like whatever morbidity you could assign to a neighborhood, high homicide rate, jail rate. I mean, you could put on Ward 8, low life expectancy. But anyway, I mean, living in Ward 8, they had a vote last year during the election, the 2020 election, and the mayor assigns where the voting locations are. And the way that they put the voting locations, they were all in like gentrifying neighborhoods. So if you lived in like a gentrifying neighborhood, you could like walk to like a voting location. But like some of the most isolated, like impoverished parts of the ward, like were miles from like a voting location. And this was during the pandemic when all of the buses were like shut down. And like, it's like part of the politics of this area. Oh, and then also like the mail-in votes, like we don't receive mail out here. Like the mail is like really bad. A lot of people don't get their mail. So people don't regularly get their mail. So people weren't getting like the mail-in ballots and all that stuff. And so like the way that they positioned the voting booths was basically, so like they were in the gentrifying neighborhoods, but then like in all the poor neighborhoods, there were none, even though there were opportunities to open some in the poor neighborhoods, they didn't. And this was because the mayor's rival, well, someone that the mayor doesn't want as council member, was in this location. So like she was trying to get somebody else elected, which she had done in the prior election. And so, and the person she wants to get elected is more like kind of mainstream, would be fit in more with like the gentrifiers.
For what position?
Yeah.
What position did she not want? And who's the mayor we were talking about?
Mayor Bowser, Muriel Bowser. This is for the council seat, one of the council seats. Because the council approves the budget, and like she, you know, she always is looking for votes on council.
Wow.
It sounds like a microcosm of things we're hearing about with voting changes in other places and restricting voting here and putting polling places in, you know, where it's easy for the right voters and not putting them where we don't want people. I mean, it's like that in miniature, and you know, Ward 8 is relatively a small place compared to a whole state.
Right.
This sort of thing is going on.
Right.
There's an injustice, boy.
Yep.
Wow.
Why do you think, going back to the gentrification, why do you think and who was it that ultimately decided to do what they're going to do anyway? What group of people?
The zoning commission.
Okay, so what incentive is there for the zoning commission to disregard the rights and the voices of the residents?
Well, the zoning commission is the mayor's agency, which, you know, and the mayor decides how development goes. And so the mayor tells the zoning agency, hey, I want you to approve these projects. Tells a planning agency, I want you to plan this. And the mayor's incentive is tax-based. So like, you know, if you don't have money, I mean, that means you're a drain, because you're not paying taxes. Not only are you not paying taxes, but you may be collecting welfare. You may be on, you know, on public housing. You may have all kinds of subsidies from the government. But here's an interesting thing, like with gentrification, I mean, you're just reversing the subsidy, you know, like the subsidy then goes to the developer, the subsidy then goes to the newer residents. But I think the way that the mayor looks at it is there's a greater return on the newer residents. So like, you know, if I'm going to be spending some subsidy, you know, at least it should be with these people who are going to have a discretionary income and are going to spend money and make the city popular and all this stuff.
So they're running away. They're running away poor people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So isn't the St. Elizabeth's project Ward 8?
St. E's, yeah, St. E's is in Ward 8.
And how are you seeing that developing as a big, I mean, that's a huge project.
I mean, I'll be, you know, I'm watching. I mean, that's pretty far up MLK, closer to Congress Heights. And I know that gentrification, you know, it generally happens in it's works together. So like, you know, it doesn't work independently. So I mean, I know I have my eye in Ward 8 on Anacostia, because everything over there is high. Yeah, there's synergy, like gentrification happens with synergy. So it's more than one project. You know, it's a lot of stuff happening, and that's happening in Anacostia right now. You got the Frederick Douglass Bridge, 11th Street Bridge, MLK Gateway, Reunion Square, Columbian Quarter. You know, everything over there is just blowing up right now.
based on what you're saying, it's not, because some people might hear gentrification and think that it's a race issue, but it doesn't seem like it's a race issue because the mayor of DC is an African-American woman, right?
Right.
It seems as though it's a thing against poor people.
Well, I don't want to offend anybody, but there's a saying in Ward 8 to describe people like the mayor, and they call them Negropeans. So they're
What's a Negropean? Let's define that term.
well, so maybe it's not money or race, maybe it's cultural, right? So maybe she's black, but like culturally, you know, she's not a part of the black collective, you know, in Ward 8. She's not.
So what does that mean? Tell me what that means.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, when you start talking about it in like political subunits like a ward, like it's pretty easy for us to be on the same page with things. Like we don't need to talk to each other to be on the same page. And Ward 8 is 95% black. So is that a black opinion, a Ward 8 opinion? I don't know, but like we get on the same page with stuff. You know, and the mayor's not on the page with Ward 8. Like, so is that a black opinion? Is that a poor or rich opinion, or is it cultural? I think a lot of it is cultural. And yeah, she's definitely not with us. And another famous one is all skin folk and kinfolk.
All skin folk ain't kinfolk. Now, is this Mayor Muriel Bowser?
Yeah.
That's her.
Okay. So we have an injustice where people in a particular part of the city, they're getting displaced against their wishes and wants, even though there's laws in place that should protect them. And again,
Right.
we go back to what we say to this show so often, is the system is not necessarily broken. It's the people who are running the system that are broken, that are crooked. Dr. Cheney, I know you have tons of questions. What would you like to ask Mr. Ari today?
I'm fighting this fly. I'm glad you came on that show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, you just got to bear with me because this is a little lengthy. Gentrification does not benefit the poor, and this is my assessment. It's reverse Robin Hood, robbing the poor and giving to the rich. And you can talk about that. Gentrification is a global phenomenon. That was new to me. That in 1960, there are writings about London, and it's covering Notting Hill. You might know about that. And basically, they talked about the severe impact on earlier Caribbean tenants. And as they migrated there and they developed carnivals and all kind of lifestyles, what they do, and what we do. And eventually, along comes gentrification. Another 2005 article lists 3 key problems. 1, the inequality of community disruption. We can talk about that. Working class displacement. The erosion of affordable housing in major cities. And I'm talking like this because this is a very important topic to us here in the Washington, D.C. area, and pretty much globally, as the research will tell us. Regarding your views, the media reports your views to include race, class, and age, all leading to widespread gentrification and displacement. You know, the thing that I was listening to Salon, and we're talking about the mayor and different politicians. The thing that concerns me, and you could talk about this, is that ideally this is supposed to be a pro-tenants district, that the DC government has all kinds of rules supposedly to benefit tenants. And so how come we're in this slot the way we're in? And finally here, Google did a search or Google search reveals that there can be benefits to gentrification, but only to long-term residents who are not pushed out. Development without displacement is the key. Fighting displacement rather than fighting against development should be the focus. Is DC moving in this direction? I asked you that.
I don't think DC is moving in that direction. I think DC is moving in. I don't know. You hear so many things. One of the things that you just heard about is that DC is like going to find housing, permanent shelters for like 4,000 people or something like that. It sounds good. I don't know if I believe it, but I guess I'll believe it when I see it. And I mean, with the policies, I mean, I feel like all they've done really is kind of make it easier. So like Chairman Hood doesn't have to make those kind of ridiculous decisions anymore. They've just kind of rewritten the statute to make it easier to do the things that they want to do. So they're not caught in these situations where they're breaking the law. Yeah, I think it's going the opposite direction. And I agree with you. I think that the key never is stopping development. Development is inevitable. Development's going to happen as part of human nature. I think the key is including everyone in it. So more people can prosper from development, because it's not, it is very much like you said, you know, a reverse Robin Hood situation. You definitely are taking from people with less to make it easier for people with more, and that's that may work good on your budget, but I think morally and ethically, there's more we should be doing.
All right, I just have two more quick ones. TOPA and gentrification. TOPA, as we know, is the acronym for Tenants' Opportunity to Purchase. A sale. And gentrification, I am saying, is demolition. All right? Before the filing of your Berry Farm gentrification lawsuit, were your lead plaintiffs officers of the Tenants Association? Because I heard about party status, and I do have a reason to ask that, because we've gone through some issues here, and we've had tenants to move forward, and they've been kicked out because of party status or lack of standing. Was there ever a standing issue regarding the tenant plaintiffs? And now
No.
pretty much you said, no?
No, they always had standing and deserved party status. I mean, they all lived there. They had units that were being demolished.
Yeah. And when the tenants received the notification, I don't know how this would have been done, but I know how it was done with TOPA. When they received notification from the government, what was the next step? Were they, can you tie in TOPA with gentrification? This is very different and yet similar.
Well, I don't know if TOPA has it. I don't know enough about it, but I know that for Berry Farm residents, TOPA did not apply because nobody had applied TOPA to public housing before. And so there was a question of whether or not public housing residents even had TOPA rights. And so that didn't apply at Berry Farm. But yeah, in terms of TOPA's responsibility for gentrification, I couldn't say. I don't know. I do know Andrew McGuire, the gentrification, the TOPA attorney. He's very good.
Okay. The last part, Howard Croft. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I've heard
He's a
that name.
former, Howard Croft was a former UDC professor
Okay.
in urban studies.
Yeah.
And he was also an activist with Martin Luther King, definitely there in Southeast Washington. And he
Okay.
recently died. Okay, one of the things that's interesting about him, he was going around talking about, and you can see him online doing it. He was going around talking about the white people will be coming, the white people will be coming. Fantastic, fantastic. Because he's saying that it would be positive for Southeast if you would have more diversity, based on what he's saying. So I was really thought that you might have known of him or his efforts, what he was doing in Southeast, because I heard that he died in last year of COVID.
I've heard his name, but I was not familiar with him or his work.
Okay.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it really is. And so basically, those were the concerns that I had. And the more that I read about gentrification, it does seem like it's really a race-based situation, even though it's an economical-based situation also. So it's great that you're
Yeah,
participating.
yeah. I think that there's some racialized capitalism happening for sure.
The
Um,
other thing, the other thing I'm just curious about, how do people know? You know, there's a notion, if you build, they will come. How do people know to come? Are they some way tipped off to come to these neighborhoods once the gentrification happens?
Well, it's funny you say that.
Yeah.
I just read a newspaper article, or my girlfriend showed me a newspaper article of a newspaper article about uh yeah, the New York Magazine. It was in New York Magazine,
Mm.
and it was about Anacostia, the 5 best neighborhoods in DC. And it had like Anacostia on there, and it was like a 2-page write up on Anacostia. And I was thinking to myself, man, like if I came from New York or wherever this magazine was, and I came to Anacostia, I'd be so pissed off.
Yeah, it's not
Because
exactly.
there's nothing here. There's nothing here. And you could get like mugged or shot. Like it's not even like safe like that to be like walking around like as like a stranger, you know what I'm saying? Looking lost and stuff.
they're
So,
they're they're
but
predicting
like,
the future.
yeah, but really like what it is, that's like marketing. Like they're
Right.
marketing the neighborhood. Um, you know, but there's like nothing here. There's no way that this neighborhood is like number 2 to DuPont Circle. Like, come on.
What blew me away was
Right.
the history of berry farms. After all of this, is there not going to be any more berry farms? I mean, when you talk about the civil rights and going back that far, is there going to be some? I know you said there may be a museum, but it seemed like there should be something much more than just a museum.
No, I mean that's gonna be a white neighborhood. It's gonna be a mixed income, white, a lot of white homeowners, a lot of white renters. I mean, it's gonna be like how most of the neighborhoods are in DC now. Not neighborhoods, but those big buildings, uh, you know, that are self-sustaining that nobody ever leaves.
Wow. So history is going to be erased almost because they don't teach this in the schools. I've never heard about this history of berry farms.
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and the thing is, they say that there's like it's kind of an urban legend that when the land was given to Howard to then give to the formerly enslaved, that that land was always to be for the purpose of the formerly enslaved, and that was like the deed, so to speak, that people rumor, and like there's like a myth that exists.
Yeah, so John just found this when you talk about the marketing, which Washington area neighborhoods will boom next. Number one,
Anacostia.
Anacostia.
Yeah, they've been pumping Anacostia for years, and they're going to continue to pump.
Wow.
It has all the bones of being, you know, that one of those up and coming places. Just like Bloomingdale was 20 years ago, you know, you've got the pieces there, and now you just have to get some people there and plant the money, and then the businesses come and the whole thing begins to snowball.
Yeah,
Articles like that
festivals.
that sort of does some of that.
There's all kinds of ways to market to neighborhoods like this. You know, you got festivals, you got bids. You know, they run these magazine articles about neighborhoods. Yeah, all kinds of ways that they draw people in the neighborhoods.
And as Washington goes, the housing is much more affordable. You want to buy a house, right? Anacostia is going to cost you, a third of what it might cost in Columbia Heights, Adams Morgan, wherever, you know, in the center of the city. So yeah, it might not have all of the blah, 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 or it might not be as safe as blah, 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 blah. But when you can get a house you can actually afford, that will attract, well, again, younger people, people without children, because they don't have to worry about that aspect yet. And now you start to get people in who start to change over, redo housing, attract some businesses, and then you start to get more, the city starts plowing more resources in. I mean, that's resources that should be being plowed into the neighborhood now or 10 years ago. Yeah, but then the city will be plowing more money. You know, fixing street lights, redoing sidewalks, increasing police presence, blah, 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 and on you go.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Ari, for coming on the show and educating us and giving us yet another glimpse into an injustice that's surrounding us. And some people may not have known this, and it may not directly impact them, but it's good to know what is happening around us.
Okay.
So
Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on. And you all have a great weekend, rest of your weekend.
All right, you too, my
All
man.
right, good to see you.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you as
Right.
well, John. Okay, bye.
Bye.
So, John, what do you think?
Well, I mean, he summed it up so well. I mean, one of the things we kind of glossed over, though, since we're talking about injustices, is so many of these kinds of projects, like he's talking about, where we're going to redo Barry Farms, we're going to redo Kelly Miller Homes in Ward 1, and we're going to tear them down, or we're going to gut them and redo them. But even though, like, these residents wanted to say, well, do this gradually so we can stay here. You know, you're destroying a community. I mean, the injustice there, because I know many of these situations, like I bet those residents at Barry Farm, they got put on a list. And when this is all done and it's all spanking clean and wonderful, you can come back. But you know how long that often takes? That may take anywhere from 5 to 10 years. Now, let's say the city's done a good job in actually keeping track of me. I was a resident, right? They kept track of John Salati. But 7, 8 years from now, and they call me, oh, John, you know, Barry Farms is done. You can come back now. Is it realistic to think that having hopefully reestablish myself somewhere, I'm going to tear myself out of that place and come back to this place, which will be physically somewhat familiar, although it will have been transformed in many ways. But what made it a community can almost never be restored that much time gone by. As opposed to, okay, we're going to redo this in stages. And in most of these kinds of housing complexes, there are often a number of vacant units. So they, you know, the city could empty a building. In other words, congregate the residents, the existing residents in these other buildings. Yeah, we moved you from this building to this building, so that way we emptied this building out completely, and we'll restore this building.
Right.
And move people to that building, and we'll work on another building. So at least the community, one, the people stay together, and the inevitable, what makes community, the lives, the interactions, that gets maintained. So even if the city does an amazing job of keeping track of people, which often people get lost, right? 5, 6, 7 years, who doesn't keep an address, whatever. But even if they kept all that, bringing them back years later, it's just not realistic. I know a much smaller place than Barry Farms, but where this happened, Ward 1, and yeah, they moved everyone out. They restored these buildings, did a very great job, and one resident came back.
Wow.
One elderly resident came back. These two buildings, there might have been, what, 40 some odd, maybe 50 units in these two buildings. One resident came back.
Wow.
So yeah, yes, you improved them. Yes, you did some good things. Yes, but you still destroyed a community. And what more of an injustice can there be than that? And who is it happening to? Those who are the most vulnerable, the most without the means to defend themselves or to even just pick up and move.
Right.
Times. And in many cases, like Barry Farms, you're talking public housing. So here it is, public housing, that is something that we are supposed to be doing to uplift people that are struggling on some level. And instead we get more focused on either who's going to do the work, get paid for the work, and the physical structures rather than the human structures. The human structures get pushed to the side, and unless there's an Ari around who's going to essentially often get paid very little, but who does it as sort of, that's his mission.
Right.
Those people, oh, well, you don't have standing because, well, you're, I mean, that Anthony Hood could say such a thing, but he could get away with it. I mean, that's, and not even so much that he could say it, but
Get away with doing it.
and he got away with it. Like nobody even batted an eye at it. It's not like some court came along and said, now tut tut, that's no.
Right. Dr. Cheney, what were your thoughts?
Well, hopefully I conveyed them, but I'm thinking still about it being a global phenomenon. That I ran across some research that said Harlem, New York. Remember when Bill Clinton went to Harlem and opened his office? Harlem has changed.
Harlem has changed.
A lot of people left. California. So California has changed. It's going to be interesting with California, though, because even though it's gentrified with all the people that are coming into California, and what I'm hearing is such a large homeless population. And so that would be ripe for more gentrification.
And then there's cities all across the country. We have people
All
who
across.
watch this show from all across the country. Who's to say that their city is not next?
Yeah. And it seems to be that in these communities where people do not have a lot of money, they're being targeted because it's easy to move them if they don't own anything. And even if they own something, I guess you could increase the tax base and all that and eminent domain, and they would be looking.
I think that's the injustice, because it's the people who don't have money, they don't have a voice.
The renters.
And you
It's
could
the
come
renters
in,
that get hit.
you could come in and do what you want with them, and what are they going to do? They can't hire an attorney to represent them. No one's going to listen to them. So they have to pick up and either be homeless or go live with a relative or get public assistance in some other part of a city that's yet to be gentrified.
Well, and I think in DC's case, what has often happened in those kinds of situations that you described, Salon, is that those poorer people, again, particularly the renting class of people, because now the rents rise, they move where have they moved? They've moved to the, what you'd call the inner suburbs. You know, just, they're actually moved out of DC, PG County, Hyattsville, you know, those areas, Congress Heights. So these areas just over the borders in Maryland, on that side of the city, where, yeah, they've left the district because it's too expensive to stay there, and as the rents rise. The owners, let's say the longtime owners of houses, the sad, but who can blame them? They say, wow, you know, my family's been here for 3 generations, but I can now sell my house for $600,000. And they do. They up and, so they chose, they were.
But what they do is, because these are where investors come in, they would come and they will say, hey, I'll give you 200,000 for this house. And it's someone who's lived in this house without a mortgage because it was handed down from their parents. And so they say, $200,000. Oh my goodness, that's so much money. They get it. The person invests in it and then they sell it for 6, 8, or even $1 million.
That kind of swindling happens too. But even if that doesn't happen, you lose a whole part of your community because a long-term family decides they can actually get market rate. So if they're getting, now, you know, their house probably needs work and it's this and it's that. So they're not getting the toppest dollar. Okay, fine. But they're still getting 500,000, 600,000. And what do? They take their money and they leave the District of Columbia because they can't necessarily roll that over in the district. So they move. So you're losing a piece of your community, you know, a long-term aspect of your community fabric, even for people who are doing well by the capitalism. That is, they sold out, they chose to sell out, and they got a good value. They're leaving, and you're losing, the city loses something, the community loses something. And then there are the swindles or, you know, the undercutting, because they're the people who don't know any better. Some elderly resident, oh, $250,000. Wow, that's 20 times what grandma paid for this house in 1925. Right. Of course, they could get 50 times what grandma paid for that house in 1925. That does happen. You're right.
You know what I want to add to the conversation is that when people that are not, people who visited these communities and they've experienced excitements like the carnivals and the way things are done, the different markets where they sell unique products and whatnot, I think that attracts them to these areas. But once they get in these areas and they have lived in these areas and they no longer have that, they eventually will leave. What do you think about that? There's something that brings them here. You don't just come for a new house. You could come for the convenience, perhaps, but there's something more to it. And then that's gone.
Right. You come for the community. Well, see, again, it all depends on where you come in the stage of the thing. But if you come early, relatively early, where change is happening, but still there's a sense of what the community has been. And that's why you move there, because it's cool. It's interesting. They're nice people. There's a fabric. People say, hey, I mean, again, the long-term residents are often very welcoming. And that then, but as more and more people move in, yeah, you lose some of that, even as you gain other things. See, again, the flip side of that is now you're going to gain restaurants that may not have been there before, or other businesses that are there. So that makes it nice to say. But at some point, it may be that, oh, yeah, this is just like any other pretty nice place. And maybe one's desire to stay wanes. And
you can't forget the people who are coming in, because it's a wealthier, more expensive place. It's pushing out. The crime rate drops.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it does, yeah.
So that is a huge attraction for people. They want to live in a safe place. So there's pros and cons. Leave your comments, send an email. We don't have our comments up, but send an email to the legal zone at Remus Law and tell us what you think. Gentrification, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
And subscribe.
Yes, subscribe right down on the channel. The shows that we have coming, they're going to involve, we talked about a police officer and other professionals to talk about the injustices that they face in life. Dr. Cheney, thank you for being here today.
Okay, thank you.
John Salati, thank you very much for your presence.
Great conversation, Salon. Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching our video. For experienced legal services in Washington, D.C., Alabama, and Washington State, visit our website at remuslaw.com or call us at 1-833-329-1799.
When someone goes through a divorce, they lose their best friend. They lose their house. They lose their children. Any time away from your child is a loss. Let's face it, divorce kills. The average cost in the United States for a divorce is $13,000. It's not uncommon for a divorce to cost well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. At Remus, we take into consideration you, the divorcing spouse, your property, your money, and your children. We assist clients in directing them to therapy, mentorship programs, savings. We mitigate the cost of divorce to keep your expenses down. We look out for the client holistically.
I came to Remus Law seeking a divorce. Salon listened to me. I told him my story. When he mailed me a copy of the complaint, which summarized my story, he was able to say exactly what I had been feeling for so many years. When my husband was served with the complaint, he came to me with tears in his eyes. He said he didn't know this is how I was really feeling. He asked if we could try again.
At Remus, we do all that we can for our clients.